Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Narrator Roundtable. I'm Gail Shalan, and in the coming weeks, our audience will learn a lot about the Narrator Roundtable's 5 rotating permanent hosts. But before we dive into the important, thought-provoking, and potentially contentious hot topics that we thought deserved our attention, let's get to know each of our hosts a little better. Joining me today is my co-host, Kirt Graves. Hey, Kirt.
Hi, Gail. How are you?
How are you?
I'm also very good. It is, I'm very excited about doing this work with you and with everybody else. And I am nervous about talking about myself because it's not something I'm naturally good at, but we will endure.
Well, you're naturally spectacular, so I think we're all going to have a good time. I'm going to talk about you first, though. How about that?
Love it.
Okay. So, Kirt, I first met you a few years ago when we were both serving on the PANA DEI committee, and I definitely seen your lovely face in the online social media space, but as someone newer to this industry myself, I had never met you in person before. I'm lucky enough to have now, but while we were in that space together, you immediately struck me as such a nurturing champion of others, and listening to your work and seeing what you choose to narrate, watching some of your other projects that are not related to audiobooks come to life, it is very clear to me that you offer your gifts, narration and beyond, as an act of service. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what would you say, in a few words, your why for the generous way in which you engage with your creativity and your work is?
Wow, thank you for that. First, it's interesting to hear you say something like the work I choose, because I so seldom feel like I'm getting to choose my work. It always feels like you are being chosen. It often feels like something that happens to me, not something that I choose to do for myself. And in an interesting way, I think a lot of my life has been that way. I feel sometimes I've just been chosen. I've been in the right place at the right time to do things. I also think, I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I'd like to think that maybe some of the good stuff stuck, including things like acts of service that I do find important. I also think that I have whatever qualities it takes that people often look to me to be in a leadership role. And I was taught, it was instilled in me, or maybe it was inherent that I feel like if you can do something, you should do something. So I don't shy away from putting myself in a position to help others if I think I can actually do it. So I feel it's not so much a thing that I choose to do, but they're things that choose me, and I answer the call.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that feels really organic and effortless is the wrong word, but intuitive, and that's awesome. Okay, I'm gonna mix up. We talked about what we were going to talk about beforehand a little bit, but I'm gonna mix this up because of what you just said. So given that your life path has taken you in a lot of different places, do you want to tell us a little bit about where you did come from beyond your like church upbringing? What else in your childhood has influenced what you do now? What other jobs did you have? And who are you, like, outside of the booth that might surprise our listeners, or is there something that you'd like to share with them that maybe they don't know?
Well, I grew up in a town called Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which is only famous because John Candy mentioned it in the movie Home Alone. It is also home of the bratwurst and Kohler toilets.
Oh, yeah.
So in that way, I am a proud Sheboyganite. I was a very good student, very high achieving, and then I am also a college dropout. I flamed out real hard. And I have come to learn later in life that was probably due to some neurodivergence that had not yet been identified at that time.
Oh, yes, us twice gifted folk,
yes. I'm also gay, and I realized I was gay very early in my teens. I came out at 17. I think a lot of my personality uh, was born from those years of knowing something about myself that I couldn't share with anybody else, having to hide,
Yeah.
having to be hyper observant of the world around me and the people around me so that I could modulate my
Mm.
own behavior so I wasn't discovered. I think I'm probably still dealing with the trauma of all of that, even now at 39,
Yeah.
and still realizing that that is something I went through. Like, I think that's probably a
Mm.
recent revelation from the last few years. As a high achiever who then crashed and burned, I had I've done lots of jobs. Most notably, I worked in an outpatient mental health clinic for many years,
Mm.
where I think I grew a lot of empathy, and my sense of humor, which is somewhat dark, I think also comes from that time in my life, because if I didn't have a sense of humor, I wouldn't have survived.
Mm.
Um, Thankfully, it's also where I learned not to be judgmental of mental illness, because that is also something I now deal with, and and runs in my family.
Mhm.
Then I worked for a healthcare technology company. I always like to say, like, do you know the "Help, I've fallen and I can't get up" commercials?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that kind of help, that kind
We
of
mock them all the
yes,
time.
that kind of technology. I started as a traveling
Okay.
salesman, and then became the marketing manager, and eventually the general manager. So I worked my way through a small business, and then I've
Yeah.
worked for a school district. For 15 years, I was a high school speech and debate coach, working with kids on writing speeches, delivering speeches, but also acting, interpretation of literature, poetry, prose, um, all of that. Was very lucky to work with some excellent kids, and had success as a coach. Was honored at the state level and had some national finalists. Very proud of that
Mm.
work.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I found audiobook work. Oh, and in the
The
mix too, I
magical
forgot,
work
I
of
was a youth
audiobooks.
minister for
Yeah.
6 years.
Whoa!
Yeah,
I
that kind
feel
of
like there's no way
straddled.
you have had enough time to do all of this, but
Well,
that's amazing.
so part of what I've now learned as a result of my ADHD and OCD is that, like, I was never satisfied unless I was doing 3 things. 3 jobs at once
Yes.
was sort of
Yeah.
like my
Yeah.
MO for most of my 20s.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
So I was a youth minister while I was working at the clinic, and then partially while I was working at that healthcare technology company, and also I was working at a restaurant during that time, and also I was coaching forensics. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
You made time work differently for
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
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 Because my
Yeah.
brain was just happy when it didn't have to think about something else. As long as I could be
Yeah.
focused on the thing that's in front of me and going, 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 I worked fine.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Drive that fast
Yeah,
car.
yeah.
I hear you.
So those are all
Yeah.
my weird jobs that I did, that I think turned out were perfect training for this work. Who knew?
Right. I mean, it sounds like you were just made to play so many different parts and have through I mean, yeah, like a beautiful pearl in the ocean, through all sorts of strife and waves of life have become this like gorgeous, perfect object to be making this art. And to that point, you have narrated so many different genres. Like you said, a lot of different types of work just comes to you. Um, Most notably, you've talked about loving to narrate sci-fi, fantasy, romance, and YA that particularly resonates with your own youth experience of, like you were saying, creating that resilience and also processing that trauma. And I think that's super meaningful. Could you tell us a little bit more about what your favorite material to narrate is and um, what you feel like you've built a reputation for doing?
Yeah. I mean, the one connecting factor for most of those genres is they are also romances. Uh, but, like,
Okay.
when I'm marketing myself, you almost have to expand beyond that, because romance can be an umbrella for so many other genres. But it is where I started,
Yes.
and it is where I tend to live. And I do like romance. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know that I hear that enough from people, like, because it's so prevalent and it's a
Mm.
lot of the work, like, I always wanna remember to say that I do like that work. Do I want it to be 99% of what I do? No, I would love it if it were closer to like 70.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the few times I've gotten to do YA, I mean, obviously that's not an original answer. Everybody loves doing YA. It's where the most progressive, interesting, exciting stuff is being written right now. It's a great genre to be narrating.
Yeah.
And for somebody
Yeah.
like me who didn't have queer books as a teenager, to be
Yeah.
bringing those stories to young people and telling queer stories I never would have thought would be coming out and are frank and honest and authentic. Like, obviously those speak to me
Yeah.
in a really special way. But I also love the discovery of doing things new and different. I like to be challenged. My brain likes a challenge. So,
Mm-hmm.
I'm open and excited about any project that comes my way.
Yeah.
Even the romances, like sometimes they're very exciting, but
Well, yeah, like you say, I mean, romance is quite an umbrella term, and sometimes you get these incredible stories. If you don't love a happily ever after, what is wrong with you,
right.
frankly? But also, like, there's so much we can touch upon in something that is umbrellaed as romance, and it also, which kind of resonates with what you're talking about, loving in young adult. It's an act of service. You're providing something for a listener base that needs that space, that wants that
Mhm.
space, and
And they
you're
are
making a beautiful world for somebody.
right. And they are a wonderful part of this industry. Romance
Yeah.
readers are
Yeah.
fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
they really are supporters, they are loyal, they are champions of the work.
Mm.
Like they love audio. Not all of them, obviously, it's not for everybody, but like they find narrators that they enjoy and they champion them. At least the guys.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
that's a whole
Yeah.
conversation we could have.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
But at least the guys. So that.
They definitely do. I think you're right. In general, as narrators who tend to um disappear behind the curtain, kind of be uh like the servers of the story rather than in the spotlight. Um, a romance fan base is a gratifying experience that we don't often get
Yeah.
elsewhere. And I'm glad that that your listeners get to say thank
Yeah.
you.
And I'm
I
so
think that's
grateful for them
important.
because I mean, it's why I have a career because
Yeah.
it took somebody liking me and saying so for somebody else to
Mm,
find me, you know? Like the way they
exactly.
talk about the art is what allowed me to gain a reputation and eventually get more work.
Okay, well, that's a lovely thing about what we do. I'm gonna flip the table here. If you had a magical power to change one thing about the way the industry currently works that you don't love so much, with a snap of your fingers, what might that be?
Oh, there are so many answers. Like this is the genie dilemma, right? Like how do you get
Yes,
more
that's
wishes
true.
out of your single wish or your 3 wishes, you know? Cuz
No, I
like
know,
how
and you
many times can
can't,
I
you
snap my
can't. You only
fingers,
get
Gail? How
3.
many times can I snap them? Cuz I have several things that we could fix.
You get 1 snap, but you know what? You get endless episodes of this show,
True.
so if you wanna bring something back around later and bring a panel
This
discussion,
whole
we can
podcast is
certainly
really
do
an exercise in trying to snap our fingers and make things better. Yeah.
exactly.
So,
So true.
if I could because it's magical and I can say anything, I think what could be really interesting is if we snapped our fingers and everybody's memory of past performances was erased. Because I think it could be really interesting for our industry, for at least for a little while, to be totally based on like the merit of an audition.
Yeah, yes.
Doesn't matter what your name is, doesn't matter how many books you have under your belt, doesn't matter how long you've been doing this. Do you grasp the story and tell the story in the most effective and engaging way?
Mm.
As somebody, I consider myself one of the lucky ones to have entered this industry in 2016. through the indie space, through ACX. I don't think you can do that now.
No.
I think the hill has gotten much higher. So that uphill battle is just harder and harder and harder now. And I also think the art form has changed so much in the last 10, 15 years that it would be very interesting to see how some of our most celebrated, venerated narrators would do if they were brand new.
Yeah, no resting on their
Because I
laurels.
think it's a whole different world.
Yes. Yes, very much so.
And I think those of us who are newer, and not new, because I can't consider myself new anymore, but even those of us who are newer, I think sometimes have a hard time explaining to folks who have been in the industry longer than us how difficult the path is, or why we have the worries that we do, or why it's not as simple as just saying, well, do your best, be the best performer, the best person always wins out. It's like, well, no, that's not true. That's not how it works. There are 100 factors that go into getting jobs and doing well on them, and then getting the attention once you've done a really good job, and getting the awards that you can use to market yourself. I mean, all of that is very, very difficult.
Yes.
And I don't know that there's any way to get back to where it's just about talent and skill without snapping our fingers and erasing everybody's memory and saying, let's all start from zero. Let's all prove ourselves.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a good use of that.
And I mean, there's other problems in our industry, but I just think that would be like, that would take care of a lot of them, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right, because, as I'm sure we'll discuss on further episodes, it's like, it doesn't just affect the individual, right? It's like there is a whole default that's been set in terms of the opportunity, the go-to voice that has pushed so many people aside before they've even had a chance to show up at the starting line.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And there is a style that for many years was like in vogue, and I'd be very interested in getting away from that.
Yeah.
Like,
do you find, this is a like tangent question, do you find as you're working and as you're listening to newer folks come through that the style is shifting in your feelings, or that's sort of like there's a ceiling to that, the pushing against that classic style?
what I know is that I like people who don't have that narrator voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard it called that by people who use it very effectively and are very good at this work, and like that is part of their ethos. It's part of their brand. It's part of how they approach the work. I know that doesn't work for me as a listener. And I try not to fall into the narrator voice when I'm narrating.
Yeah.
I think it makes for a more engaging story. And I can recognize in new narrators when they think that's what they're supposed to be doing. And maybe it is, because plenty of people find success doing that. And this is why I'm not a coach, because like I would want to coach to what I like, and that's not necessarily what you're supposed to do. So like I'll give anybody advice, but I'm not going to charge for it, because I'm just going to try to make you what I like, which is a very grounded, empathetic, conversational way of telling a story, where what's on the page drives what you sound like. Not the idea of like what the pace and style and diction and like inflection should be.
The proper way to narrate any audiobook.
Right.
I mean, and I think that's interesting too, because that expands as publishing expands. We hear such a wider variety of voices, and some genres are now getting space that haven't previously. It's like that allows more space for our craft to grow and expand as well.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to throw some rapid fire questions at you, just about projects that I'd love to highlight of yours.
Okay.
One word answer or a couple word answers would be great. Okay, so Is there an upcoming or recent release that you are most excited about?
I am most excited for Icarus by Kay Ankrum, which is coming out early 2024. And I am prepping it
Awesome.
now, and I'm very excited for it.
Ooh, me too. Okay. Is there a book that you've narrated that really surprised you?
I guess the very first one. I was
Yeah.
surprised at the reception it got. I was surprised that I'd accidentally found my way to an author who was quite popular, and I've been surprised every step of the way as that author has become very popular and brought me with him. So, yeah, I was
Wow.
super surprised by that first book.
Do you want to share what that was?
It's Wolf Song by TJ Klune, which he
Yeah.
published through an indie publisher in 2016. It was his first attempt at writing like a paranormal romance with like werewolves, shifters,
Yeah.
like entering
Wow.
that world.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not traditional at all. He took a chance on a brand new person who had never recorded an audiobook before.
Wow.
And this year, that book was re-released by Macmillan in hardcover, and it
Wow.
has like special editions through Barnes and Noble. Like that series is now coming out again 7 years later.
Wow. That feels very connected to you, just attracting the things that you're meant for. That's incredible. Okay, next question. We could talk forever about that. I have so many questions. Okay, next
Yeah.
question. A book that you narrated, could be recently, could be way back in time, that feels like it was totally your Goldilocks just right moment. Like this fits just right.
The book is And They Lived by Stephen Salvatore, which was the first book that I got because I reached out to the author directly and was like, hey, I want to narrate this book you're talking about. It sounds incredible. And then it ended up being a perfect fit. It talked not only about being queer, it talked about having anxiety, it talked about body issues, all of it. It was a perfect fit. And I love that author, both as a artist and now as a friend.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, I'm definitely adding that to my to be listened to. And if you want to get to know Kirt better, listen to that book. Okay, and last one is, what does your dream project look like? Could be just your next dream project, whatever it is.
I would love to do a gay high fantasy.
Yes.
Yeah. I want
Yeah.
that challenge. I want a huge expansive world with tons of characters and accent work, and it's just so gay.
I love
That's what
it.
I want.
Yes. I want to listen to it. I want that too. Somebody make that so Kirt can narrate it, please.
Yes, please and thank you. And not a
Awesome.
co-narration, to be clear.
No, just for you. You're doing
Just
it
me.
all. Yes. All the humans, all the creatures, all the things.
Mhm.
Yes. All right, we're here for it. I love it. Well, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been so good to get to know you.
Thank you for your thoughtful questions. Like I said, I am not comfortable talking about myself often, but you made it. So thank you.
You did a great job. You did an awesome job. Thank you for joining us for this introductory episode of the Narrator Roundtable. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to the podcast anywhere podcasts are available, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible. We have some incredible conversations about our industry and our craft that will be coming to you starting in January 2024. In the meantime, you can learn more about the podcast and find links to our social media at narratorroundtable.com. You can also submit your questions for our panel of hosts and guests. What's on your mind? We want to talk about it.
The Narrator Roundtable is produced and hosted by André Santana, Deanna Anthony, Gail Shalan, Kirt Graves, and Lindsey Dorcus. All copywritten material is shared with permission. Music and sound effects are licensed through Storyblocks Audio. All opinions shared are those of the individuals and do not reflect the positions or policies of any company or organization with which they happen to be associated.